Thank you everyone for joining today. Today we're going to talk about templatize your workflow using templates in FlowJo. As we go through the webinar, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A or chat, and I'll be happy to answer them. I'm Dylan Hinson. I'm a data scientist here at FlowJo. I do our support, so if you ever email flowjo@v10.com, you might get me responding to you with, we can handle any question you send at us. So feel free, if you ever have any questions whatsoever about FlowJo, to email them to flowjo@v10.com, and we'll be happy to get back to you. So let's go ahead and dive into what we're going to talk about today. I'm just going to go over the basics on using templates in FlowJo, and then we'll get into setting our iteration, which is important for using templates, actually applying the template to a workspace, and then special bonus part, advanced topic, will be using templates in the command line. So let's first start off with what is a template and like why are we even here talking about them today. So a template can save a lot of time. It's basically a framework of the analysis that we want to apply to future data. So basically, probably we've done our analysis on a set of data that we acquired on a day, and we have all these gates and layouts and tables, and we want to take those gates and layouts and tables, and if we require future data, we want to apply those same gates, layouts, and tables to this future data set that we've acquired. And so we can quickly do that using a template. We can save our old analysis as a template and then load the new data into our old analysis and then quickly reapply all of our gates, tables, layouts to that new data using the framework of our old analysis. So it can carry over, I've already mentioned, it can carry over group-owned gates, compensation matrices, layouts, and tables. And so it pretty much gets your whole analysis if you can set it up right in a template. Okay, so what can and can't templates do? So templates can save group-owned gates. Those are gates that are applied at the group level. It can save compensation matrices. That includes acquisition find ones or ones you create in FlowJo. It can save layouts with iterations. So you have to set iteration in your layouts. Iteration basically is how FlowJo knows to load the samples back into the layout in our template. And we'll get more into that in a second here. And it'll also save your tables. What it can't save, so it can't save gates that are just on individual samples that aren't applied to a group. You have to apply the gates to a group, otherwise FlowJo won't apply it to the new data that you load into that group. So gates on individual samples aren't going to get saved. Algorithm results won't get saved. So if you've run like tsne in this instance is in the photo here, or some of our other plugin algorithms, basically the machine learning results are on a per sample basis. So we're not going to save them in the template because it won't really make sense. You can't really just apply it to future data. There are ways, of course, that you can kind of carry your previous machine learning results into future workspaces. For instance, FlowSum and UMap have an apply on map feature that you could use. But that's kind of beyond the scope of what we're doing here today. Just generally speaking, you're not going to be able to transfer your algorithm results because the algorithm results were done on a single sample or set of samples, and so you'll have to rerun the algorithm on the new data in the template. Um, Lastly, the templates aren't going to work with layouts that don't have iteration settings. So you can see here, here's the little iteration button that's in the layout. If that's set to off, when you open up that layout in a template and load new data into it, it's not going to know how to add the new data to the old layout if the iteration is turned off, and so it's just going to not do anything. So that's a brief overview on what templates can and can't do. Um, let's look at these iteration settings I'm talking about because that's pretty important. So if you're not familiar, in the layout, there's something called iteration settings. We use these when we're batching the layout. So, batching allows us to create the same layout multiple times for multiple different sets of samples. So there's three batch options. There's batch by sample, there's batch by panel, and there's batch by keyword. So batch by sample is the simplest option. It works if there's a single sample in your layout. So maybe I've just taken one sample, grabbed all its gates, put it in the layout, and then I want to replicate those same gates for every sample in my workspace. That would be the case where I'd use batch by sample or iterate by sample. And so when you choose iterate by sample, you're just choosing a single sample to load into the layout. And then if you create a batch from it, you can maybe, just go through every sample and use that same layout and apply it to each of the samples and get those results. So batch by sample is the easiest option, or iterate by sample is the easiest option. And so I'm not going to really go over that in too much detail. The next one, batch by panel, is probably more useful in a lot of situations. This is the case where I have multiple samples in my layout, but they all kind of go in order in the workspace, or I can put them in order in the workspace. And so if I batch by panel, I can just specify a number of a number of samples I want to load into the layout. So say I have 4 samples that I use in my layout to make a bunch of graphs. I can just set my iterate by panel to 4, and then it will load the first 4 samples in whatever group I have selected into the layout when I use that layout in the future. And so as long as my samples are ordered correctly in the workspace, it'll load them correctly into the layout. But finally, we maybe have this situation where we have multiple samples in the layout and they aren't ordered in the workspace, so they don't just go in order in the workspace. This is where we might have to use the batch by keyword option. The batch by keyword is the most complicated option, I think, especially if you're not used to it. It's actually pretty easy once you know what it means. And it gives you the most flexibility, and you can be really specific about what samples you want to load into the layout. So the way the batch by keyword option works, I have a little screenshot of it here. But basically, you'll be choosing 2 keywords to specify what samples should be loaded into the layout and when. And so the first keyword is this iterate by one. This basically says what samples belong in the same layout. And so, if whatever value we choose here, the samples will all share this value, and the samples that share this value will be the ones loaded into the layout. And then the discriminator tells us what order the samples go in the layout. So if you put your graphs 1, 2, 3, 4, you just want to assign that same value, like 1, 2, 3, 4, to so we properly order the graphs. It's a little abstract when I'm just talking about it looking at the slide, but I'm going to go into a live demo here in a second and we can kind of look at it a little bit more closely there. But just know that those are the 3 options that we have in our layout. In the demo today, I'll focus on the latter 2, and we can go into those in a little bit more detail. Okay. So another thing you can do with templates is there's a button that says apply template in FlowJo, and so you can use that button to apply a template to another workspace. There's a few ways you could use this. In my picture below, I'm showing basically a new workspace with just data with no gates in it. And you can use the apply template button to apply a group with gates to that workspace. So I'm using the template that has a group with group owned gates. I can apply it to that workspace, and suddenly I'll get the gates from that template. That template also has a compensation matrix that you can see, and so it'll give me that compensation matrix too. And it will actually give me anything. So if it has any layouts or any tables in that template, those will also be imported into the workspace. Where I actually like to use this apply template button is I like to use it to apply like a single table or maybe a few tables or a few workspaces to my a new workspace that I'm working on. So for instance, if I just wanted to use the template, I would just open up the template and load my data into it, and then it's pretty easy to do that. But if I wanted to, say, make new gates, so I have a new set of data, I want to make new gates for that data, but then I want to use my old layouts or my old tables maybe, that's where I could use this apply template button, and I could apply the old template, but maybe just deleting the old gates because I don't want to use those. I just want to bring in the tables or the layouts. I can do that using the apply template button. And again, I'll show that in a second here when I do my live demo. Okay, so last is going to be our kind of advanced part of the discussion, which is using templates and the command line. And so this is kind of a little bit of a wonky, and maybe if you're not super familiar with using the command line, it could be very tricky, but useful tool where you can use the command line or terminal, in my case, since I'm on a Mac, um, to take a template that I've created here and add new data to it. I can save it as a workspace. I can batch the tables, batch to the layout, create a PDF. So that's what you see here on the far right is we've taken this template, run it through the command line, and we get these outputs, including a PDF of all of our layouts. And so it's a quick way that you could go through a lot of data. So if you just had um, different, multiple different data sets that you just wanted to run through the same template to get the same analysis, the same graphs, the same tables from a bunch of different data sets. You could quickly do that by running it through the command line and generating a bunch of results that way. And so it can be useful in some situations. Oftentimes myself, my data is so precious that I want to take a look at it and manually adjust stuff and just really get in there. And so in those cases, we might not use the command line, but if you just have a lot of data that you want to go through quickly, this can be a good option. Um, okay, so I think, oh, sorry. So to get deeper into the command line, which is an advanced topic, and I realize most people in this webinar might not be diving into it today, but just so you can know what it can do, um, when I run the command line commands, there's always these three basic commands we put at the beginning. They basically just make sure everything will run smoothly. Um, and so we start with the WGA commands, and then we follow it with the application path. So in this case, that's to my FlowJo app. And on the PC, it'd look slightly different, but it'd go to your FlowJo executable in the program files. So we put in the app path. We'd follow that with the arguments. And so we just type in this little statement here, followed by these arguments down below, which is the template path. And so you can see that's just the path to my workspace template. The data folder path, so this is the path to the folder containing all my FCS files. The this dash batch command. So this dash batch command will just batch my layouts for me. I'll have to set the iteration settings up ahead of time, kind of as we discussed before. But once I've done that and set it to save to the command line, it'll batch and create a new PDF when I run the commands. There's also a batch table option, which will save the statistics. And then finally a save as option, which just saves the template as a new workspace on my computer wherever I specify. And so that's kind of a brief overview of what we can do in the command line and what commands are used to do it. And on the right is like a real command line, in this case, terminal script that I'm about to run that will actually work and get these results. Okay, so that was probably a lot. I think it'll make more sense once we go through it. And again, this is kind of an advanced feature. So if you're just interested in the basics of templates, I wouldn't worry about using the command line. I would just focus on using the basic parts of a template. So if you want additional resources, you can go to our documentation. It's easiest just to go to our website and you can click learn and then it has all the links to take you to our docs and whatnot. But you could also type in this specific URL, flowjo.com/docs/FlowJo10. Everything that we're doing today, by the way, is going to be in FlowJo 10. We have other webinars on the new version of FlowJo, FlowJo 11, but there aren't templates yet in that version, so bear with us. Those should be coming soon. Also, if you want to learn more, you can go to FlowJo University. That's our website, has all kinds of videos on different topics. And then if you want to get in touch with me or someone on my team with specific questions, you can always email us at flowjo@bd.com or give me a phone call at this number 800-366-6045. I think we're option 2. And then you'll get in touch with me or someone on my team. Okay, so let's first of all see if anyone has any questions. I don't see anything in the Q&A yet or in the chat. We're gonna go into the live section now. So I'll get started with a real analysis using templates here in a second. But yeah, if anyone has any questions so far, feel free to drop them into the Q&A or chat, and I'll be happy to get back to them. Oops. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and get started with a example analysis. So let's just open a workspace I already have. The workspace I've named template demo here. FlowJo. Okay, worked. And so this is an analysis that I've already done with my samples. I did it with this folder, this data that's in this disease data folder. But then maybe at a later date, I ran another, acquisition. I acquired new data, and that's what's in my disease data 2 folder here. This is new data that I want to put into this analysis, basically. And so I want to apply the same analysis to this new data set, and that's where templates come in. So I've done all this gating manually in my old analysis here. I've split the data into 4 groups based on their disease state. I guess I also have a compensation group too, where I've done compensation and generated a compensation matrix. You can see this red matrix here. That's my compensation matrix that I've applied to the data. And actually, let me see, I might have multiple compensation matrices here. I'm just going to delete and just leave the red one just to simplify things, because that's the only one I'm using is this red one I made in FlowJo. Okay, so I not only have the data with gates in my workspace, I also have layouts and I have tables where I have graphs and I have statistics. And so I want to basically take all these things and apply them to my new data and have them load automatically. So that's what we're using the template for. So to get started, I need to get this workspace ready to save as a template. And so there's a few things I'll want to do to the workspace just to make sure that it's ready for when I load my new data in. Um, Before I get started, let me see, somebody said something in the chat. So again, so somebody asked about transferring templates from v10 to v11. The first version of version 11 that's out right now is kind of a pretty basic initial release. So there's no templates in version 11 yet. So no, I guess you can't transfer templates into version 11 at this time. I think they're planning on adding that feature in the future, but it's not in the first release. And so we'll have to wait and see, maybe a year from now or something, we'll have a more updated version of 11. Okay, so going back, so I want to get this workspace ready to be used as a template. And so to get this workspace ready, the first thing I'm going to do is make sure my data loads properly into each of these groups. So I have these 4 groups here, and this is where I've applied all my gates is to these groups. That's one really important thing about a template is we just want to make sure the gates are applied to the groups. You can do that just by dragging and dropping gates onto the group. You don't have to do it the way I did it. You could apply like the gates to a group that shares all these samples. So I have my groups split up by each condition. I could just have one group that's like experiment data where my gates are applied as well. I don't have to split them up by condition. I just chose to do that. It might be useful to do that just if in case there was different gates for the different conditions. In my case, they're basically the same, but it could be useful. Um, for these groups, I might want to make sure my samples get loaded into the correct group as soon as I add them to the workspace template. And so the way I can do that is, for each of these groups I've created here, I can double click on them. And in the modify group section here, where we can name the group, we have some additional options down below that we can set up for our templates. So first of all, we can tick this tick box to make it a live group. That's going to be helpful for when our samples get loaded and it'll apply the gates properly in the template. And then I also want to go down here to where it says keyword, and I want to choose something, a keyword that I've included so that it knows what samples to load into this group. So in this case, for instance, I have this condition keyword. This is a keyword that I wrote into the FCS files on the cytometer, and it's this condition. You can see it here. It's my like different disease state, so flu, healthy, RSV, SARS-CoV-2. So those are my 4 conditions, and I can go ahead and just say if the condition contains flu, add it to my flu group. And so if I set it up like this and hit apply changes, it's not going to look like it does anything in FlowJo, but what it is doing is it makes it so that when I load future data, if the future data has a keyword, the condition keyword, that has the flu value, it's going to automatically put it in this flu group. So that's what I want that to do. We'll go to healthy next. I'm just going to do the same thing here. Condition, if it contains healthy, it'll automatically load it into this healthy group. Now I want to set this as a live group as well and hit apply changes. Same with RSV. Condition contains RSV. And then SARS-CoV-2. And so I can use any keyword. I'm just choosing to use the condition keyword, but you could use any, we have the full list here of keywords that are recorded in the FCS file. So if you have a value in one of those keywords that would be good for sorting the samples into groups, you could use that. Also, you don't have to do this step, so I'm doing this right now because it'll make my life easier, especially if I have many samples. But you can always also just save the workspace as a template, open the template, load the data into the workspace. All the data will get put in the all samples group. It won't get put in any of the groups that I've made here. And you can always just drag and drop the samples into those groups like you normally would. And so that's an option as well if you don't feel like or don't have a keyword to use to add the samples to the groups automatically. You could just manually, go to the all samples group and then just drag and drop a sample into whatever group it's supposed to belong in when we're using the template. Okay, so I've set up the groups. That's probably most of what I need to do here in the workspace section. The gates are applied to the groups, so that's good to go. Next, I want to go maybe make sure that my tables and layouts are okay. The good news about tables is, yeah, this is good to go. So tables, basically you don't have to do anything to them to make them easily transferable in a template. They already have iteration settings set, so they're good to go. So I'm just going to focus more on layouts. Layouts is where it gets trickier. So I have these layouts set up here that I've made for my samples, but I need to set some iteration settings so that when I save this as a template and then add new data to this template, it knows how to add that new data into my layout. So right now I have this layout. I've made some simple histogram overlays with 4 samples. So it's the same 4 samples in each of these 2 histograms. So I just need to set this layout to load 4 samples, and I'm loading it in order. So these are just like my 4 flu samples, for instance, or healthy controls. I forget which one's first in my layout right now, but it just loads them. It looks like healthy's first. So it's just loading my 4 healthy samples here in order. And so this is going to be a pretty simple layout to recreate. I can just go up to my iteration here, and this is where I can iterate by panel and set my panel size to 4. I can't iterate by sample because sample you can only use with a single sample, and in this case I have 4 different samples. And so what I'm doing here is choosing iterate by panel and setting the panel size to 4. The group right now is the all samples group, and so it's going to use my all samples group and just take the first 4 samples from the all samples group. And so you can see, I think the order is kind of reversed, but starting from the bottom, you can see it goes A6, B2, B4, A4, and so that corresponds to the first 4 samples in this group. I could switch groups, and so we can actually see it live update here. If I switch to my flu group, for instance, it's just going to use the 4 samples in order in my flu group. And so you have, uh, again, going from the bottom, A12, A2, C8, and B10, and so that's correct. So this is a cool way you can kind of quickly flip between these different sets of samples and visualize them. You could also, of course, batch this into a new layout. Speaking of batching, so let's go ahead and set up those batch conditions as well. I'm just going to set up some quick batch conditions here. This is for when we're running it in the command line. So kind of not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but I just want to show that in order to run this in the command line, what we need to do is we need to batch it to a PDF and tick this little command line box to make sure it's able to run in the command line. And then choose a location to save the output. The desktop's okay. We can choose a name for it as well. It's just naming it after my group right now. Okay, so again, we don't have to do that for a normal template, but if you want to run it in the command line, it's a good idea to set these batch settings just like this. I see another question in the chat. So the question is, how do you create a group in a template? So you can create, again, you can create the groups beforehand here. There's a few ways you can create groups. I actually made these by just dragging and dropping a folder in, but you can press this little create group button to make a group, and you can name the group whatever you want. I'm just gonna call this one example group. I'll leave this group empty. Again, you could use keyword inclusion criteria and all kinds of things like that. But I'm just going to create an empty group called example group and just to show that it can exist there. So that's how you can create a group. Um, and then the way you load data into the group in a template automatically is with those condition keywords at the bottom and setting it to a live group too. You'll want it to be a live group and you'll want it to have, well, if you want the data to load automatically, you want it to have a keyword to specify like what samples to load into each group. Again, you also don't have to load the data automatically. You could just open the template, have the samples go to all samples, and then drag and drop the samples into the groups. Okay, hopefully that answers the group question. I'm gonna move back to the layouts. Um, okay, so the main thing with this layout again is we just set the iterate to panel size to 4. It loads in the first 4 samples into the layout. It'll do that with my new template too. Let's go to this more complicated example of layout. So in this layout, I have a less easy thing to set up. So what we have going on here is we have, whoops, I didn't really want to make it full screen. We have 4 different conditions, right? We have the healthy, flu, RSV, and SARS-CoV-2. And so I have one sample from each of my 4 conditions. I'm just showing the full gating hierarchy for one sample from each condition. And so I have basically 4 different samples here, one from each condition. But the reason this is going to be a challenge is just the way my samples are ordered in the workspace. I have them grouped by condition. And so I don't really have a way to order them such that, it's just taking one sample from each condition. So this is where I might use my keyword iteration, and this is where it's going to get a little more complicated. Before I set up keyword iteration, I see 2 more questions. So I made these, there's a question about how I made the layouts. I made the layouts manually. I can maybe go a little bit more into how I made these layouts at the end. Um, but basically this one is just me dragging and dropping in each of the individual populations. The previous layout was just an overlay. Overlays you can make, I'll just do one kind of quickly here. An overlay we can make, oops, let's just choose a population and switch to, so if we start with the histogram here, CD137 doesn't really make sense, but just for an example, start with a histogram. Let me see, I have, and then we can copy the histogram into the layout. Oops. And then we get a single histogram in the layout, and then you can just choose multiple populations. I think I was doing flu there, so maybe go to my flu group and choose the other flu samples and just drag and drop their populations on top. And that's how you can get this overlay. And then I offset them, and so you can right click to do histogram offsets. And that's how you can get offset histograms. So that's a quick demo of how I made these plots in the first place. But I'm going to jump back to getting started with my keyword iteration. So again, the reason we're doing keyword iteration here is because it's a little more complicated. The samples in this plot are not set in the order that they're in the workspace. They're not grouped the same way. And so I'm going to have to use keywords to specify how to load these samples into the layout. To do that, first I need to have 2 good keywords to sort these samples by. The first keyword that I'll use is my condition keyword. I've been using that one a lot. It's the one that specifies what disease state each of these samples come from. So I'm definitely going to use that because obviously I've sorted these 4 different sets of gates by their condition. I'll also need to make a new keyword though to specify, which of these different samples to load together. So for instance, I can hit the add keyword button here in my workspace under the FlowJo tab. This will create a new keyword. I'm going to use a specimen ID keyword. I'll press OK. This will work fine. And then I can go ahead and just specify a value for this keyword. I'm going to put 1 in as my value for 4 of the samples. And so I've assigned a value of 1 to this sample, this sample, this sample, and this sample. And so now these four samples will get loaded together. They've all been grouped with the value of 1. And so what I can do is I can go over here to where it says iterate by. I can choose keyword. Um, for my iterate by, this is where I'm choosing the value that's shared by the four samples that I want to load into this layout. And so in that case, it's my specimen ID keyword, which had the samples all share a value of 1. And then my discriminator is the thing that's going to tell us which sample to load into which plots in this layout. So in this case, right, I want to make sure I use my condition keyword. My condition keyword will tell me, okay, if it has the healthy condition, load it into this first row. If it has the flu condition keyword, load it into the second row. If it has RSV, load it into the third row, etc. And so that's how we're going to use this keyword iteration settings. I know these two, what these do can maybe get a little confusing, but again, it's just the iterate by is whatever a value that's shared by all the samples that are being used in one layout. So in this case, they all share a value of 1 for their specimen ID, so I'm choosing specimen ID. The condition is a value that changes for each of the samples in the layout in order to know which graphs to put the samples in. So in this case, it's my condition keyword, which tells me which graphs to put each of my conditions in. Okay, so I'm going to press OK here. It's going to change nothing because I have the same samples chosen. But if I wanted to change things up, I can maybe assign specimen IDs to each of these other samples. I'm just doing it in order. But I could mix the order up. I mean, I guess just for fun, let's do that. So I'm going to go 4, 3, 2 with this last one. And so what we'll see is if I choose a specimen ID value, I can click either 1, 2, 3, 4. If I choose 3, it's going to change what samples are loaded in here. And so we should see that, the ones with the value of 3 are loaded in here. And so for this last one, it's kind of unique. The one with the value of 3 actually for RSV has very few cells, and that's what we see here. It has much fewer cells than these other ones. And so that's an example, I guess, of how you can set up these iterate by keyword settings. And again, the reason we're doing this is so that when we save this as a template and then open it back up, it knows how to load the samples back into these plots. And so we'll see that in a moment here. Okay, so I think this layout is now good to go, and I can save it as a template. So I see one more question. Okay, I think we're good. Just make sure I'm not ignoring. Okay, perfect. So I have my layout set up. We just did that with the iteration settings. The tables were always good to go. I could have multiple tables in here, by the way. It doesn't matter how many tables I have or layouts I have. It'll keep them all. Tables are always good to go, so we're good there. The gates are applied to a group, so we're good there. We have a compensation matrix. I deleted some extra compensation matrices I didn't want to keep, but it will save this compensation matrix I made in FlowJo, so that's great. So I should be good to go now to save my workspace as a template. I kind of did the long-winded version, but we can save the workspace as a template. There's a few different save buttons in FlowJo. My favorite one, though, is the little FlowJo icon here, and you can go to Save As, and then you can save it as a WSPT file or a template. And when I click this, it'll ask me to save it. I'm going to give it a slightly new name. I'm just going to add the word template afterwards, which I have a lot of the word template flying around here, but this is my template version of the workspace. I'm just going to save it to my desktop. Then we have this file here, and I can go ahead and close this one. Sure, we can save the changes. And so now I can open up this template, and we can see what it looks like. So when I open the template, you can see it's like the same workspace I was just looking at, except there's no data. So that's perfect because we don't want to use our old data anymore. We're done with that data. We want to load new data into this workspace and use the same analysis, but for the new data set. So we have, you can see all the gates are still applied to the groups. We still have the compensation matrix from the old workspace here. If we go to our tables, we still have the tables with the statistics ready to go. And we still have the layouts, except this time when we open the layouts, they will be blank. And that's expected because there's no data. So all this looks correct to me. Now all we have to do is add the data. So to add the data, I'm just going to take this folder I have full of FCS files and drag and drop it in. And that will add my data. It makes a new group for the folder, but it will add my data to the workspace. Okay, and I forgot I had done this. I had set up my groups with the inclusion criteria, so it automatically added samples to each of these groups based on this condition keyword. And so that's perfect. So it has my flu samples, my flu group, my healthy and the healthy group, etc. Because I took the time to set up this um, inclusion criteria here in the groups. Um, just for an example though, in my example group, I didn't add any inclusion criteria. So if I wanted to add samples to the example group, all I'd have to do is just drag and drop it in. So, I could drag and drop some samples into this example group. And then if it had any gates or analysis on this example group, that would get applied as well. But you can see, it's applied the gates from each of my groups onto each of the new samples that's loaded into these groups. So now my new data is already analyzed, already has all these gates. As a user, I think I'd want to go through and check just that nothing has changed because, data acquired on different days, antibodies get old, cytometers change, their voltage settings might drift. So there's all kinds of reasons why the signal profile of the data might change a little bit from day to day. If that's the case, there's a few tricks. I mean, we can just change it manually. There are magnetic gates in FlowJo, which if you've never seen a magnetic gate before, let me find a better thing to use it on. Um, the magnetic gates is an option under here. Oops. Sorry, I can't do it on a quad gate either. I need like one of these gates. Magnetic gate is an option down here under active gate. If you choose magnetic, it's going to center it on the center of the density population. That could be useful with templates because then the gates will automatically shift as the center of the population shifts. But at the same time, I actually don't find them that useful, and so I usually keep them turned off. Okay, so all my gates have been applied to the data. My tables are ready to go. They're automatically ready to go. Oh, one other thing I might want to do though is in the compensation here to the left of my sample name is a little compensation icon. It's using the compensation from the cytometer, the acquisition defined one. I might want to double click on this compensation and apply the compensation that was saved in my template, which you can see here. This is the one I created in my last FlowJo workspace. And if I think my FlowJo compensation is better than the cytometers, I can just grab this M icon and drag and drop it onto the all samples group to apply my compensation to all the samples. So I have that old compensation matrix that I'm using again. Um, there's maybe some discussion to be had about whether or not it's okay to use an old compensation matrix, but I'm just going to do so in this case. It's valid in a lot of cases, or it can work decently. um, okay, so over here in my tables, the tables are good to go. As I said before, if I hit create table, I'm just going to do it to display. You can see it generates some stats for whatever group I have selected. So in this case, I guess I have my COVID group selected. If I want to see it for all my samples, I could do that as well. And so it should generate my stats for all my samples. It took a moment, but there it is. Okay. And so it carries over like everything I've set in my tables, which is perfect. Now comes the tricky part though, which is the layouts. And so it hasn't seemingly automatically repopulated this layout. We'll get to that in a second. But if I go to my other layout where I batch by panel, batching by panel is simpler, and so it automatically reloads all the data into this panel. You can see it's loading the 4 samples from my RSV group correctly into this panel. Or no, that doesn't look right. Why is it just showing me the one sample? Um, weird. Yeah, it's just showing me the same sample over and over again. Well, that should have worked. I don't know why it's showing me the wrong samples. Um, let's not fixate too much on this, and we'll look at the iterate by keyword. And so this doesn't repopulate automatically. And the reason it's not doing so is because I have um, not filled my specimen ID column. And so it needs that specimen ID in order to know which samples to load in here. It looks like I had three set as my last specimen ID, but if I repopulate this specimen ID, you should see it start to fill in as I go along here. And so I can just add 1, 2, 3, 4 to each of these again to repopulate this. Okay, this last one I only included three, but that's fine. It should be able to handle it. And so you can see over here now, it's just taking a second to reload. Sometimes it reloads faster if I just toggle between these different values, but you can see it's now reloaded all the samples based on this keyword combination. And so sample value of 1, 2, 3, etc. Oh yeah, if I go to 4, just to show you, since I don't have a flu with a value of 4, I only have 1, 2, and 3 for flu, it's going to show no population for this fourth keyword value, which is correct because there is no fourth flu sample. So that's fine, and that works well. Okay, so I see some questions. Um, okay, there was one question about what an ACS file is. An ACS or archive file is like a workspace file, except it stores all the FCS information with the workspace information. So it's like one bundled group of all your data. It's going to basically duplicate all of your FCS data. And so it's going to be basically as big as all your FCS data put together. So it's quite a large file, but the advantage is if you move the ACS or if you share it from one computer to another, say you give it to another user, you don't need to give them all your FCS files as well. It has everything packaged together. The ACS file also will save versions each time you save it, and so there's a few advantages to the archive or ACS format. Doesn't really have anything to do with templates though, but it's a different file type that you could use. There's also a question about, yes, so there's a question about the compensation matrix from my last experiment, which I applied to my new experiment. And yeah, exactly. So I um, made this compensation in my last experiment. When I saved the template, it saved this compensation in the template. And then I just dragged and dropped this M icon onto my all samples group, but you could drag it to any group to apply the compensation to that group. When I first loaded the samples into this template, they had their default compensation, which is the one from the cytometer. And so I just switched it to the compensation from my old analysis. Um, And there's a question about adding a date column to the table. I can just show that really fast, I suppose. So you can add any statistic or keyword as a column to the table. And if you go to the Edit tab and hit Add Column, you can choose between statistics or keywords. And then for the date, it depends on what your cytometer has recorded into your FCS file for what is going to be available on this list here. But most cytometers have a $ date keyword that you could use. Um, so yeah. Okay. There's one person asking me to solve the layout problem with this. I think what had happened is I actually would have to go back to my original workspace and change something there. I may have made my original workspace from a template, and that might be why it's mad at me. So it would be a big detour, so I might do that at the very, very end. But basically, it's because I set up my original workspace weird. I think I was doing it from a template. That's probably why my other layout is not reloading in the correct order. Um, so I might come back to that at the end, but for now, let's check out some other things you can do with templates. Um, so going to, okay, so I've kind of loaded everything. I have this template set up the way I want it to. So that's the basic overview of how I would repopulate this template and make it ready to go. Um, but if I wanted to go ahead and do some other tricks you can do with templates. I'm going to close this template. I guess just to show, when I close it, I'll save it. And then it'll save it as a new workspace here. I guess just as a word of warning though, it just uses whatever name I gave the template. And so sometimes I might want to hit save as and rename it as something different, especially if I just kept the template with the same name as my original workspace. Um, but now it's created this new workspace and I can open up this new workspace in the future and it has all that analysis that I just loaded in here. And so it's just like a normal workspace now that I made from the template. Okay, so let's say, well, actually I can use this. So let me just use this. Let's say I had another table that I wanted to apply from a workspace to this template. So I think I have an example. I thought I saved an example somewhere. Maybe I put it. Okay, well, uh, I guess this will work as an example. So yeah, anyways. So I have this table, let's say, in this template here. This is a pretty blank template. I've deleted all the groups. I've deleted all the layouts. I've deleted most of the tables. I just have this one table, but I want to apply this one table to this already existing workspace over here. So I just want to take a table from a different workspace and transfer it into a workspace with other analysis. But I don't want to apply any like gates from this workspace or any layouts from this workspace. So what I can do is what I've done basically is I've deleted out all the layouts. I use the minus button here to delete all the layouts. I deleted all the groups. I just pressed the delete button on my keyboard to delete the groups. And I kind of created this blank template here with nothing in it except for this one table. And I can apply this one table to my already existing workspace. And the way I can do that is go ahead and close this template. And you can see here I just have this one table, but in a second here I'll have two because what I'm about to do is go over here to the File tab and hit Apply Template. And then I can drag and drop in, or I can choose here the table template, which um, these are a little short for their names. Oh, oops, press the wrong button. Okay, my table template here, if I press open, it's going to apply that template to the workspace. And so what's done over here, you can see it just added that table to this workspace. And it did basically nothing else. And so now I have that new table in this old workspace. And so I'm able to continue forward with this new table ready to go. So that's a neat trick you could do if you've, say, changed a bunch of your gates. I actually changed a few of the gates here, and I want to load some analysis from a different workspace into this one without applying like the gates from that analysis or the layouts or whatever. I can just delete anything I don't want to apply and just keep what I do want to apply, save it as a template, and then use the apply template button. Just to show more broadly what the apply template button does, because I never really showed that. So if I'm starting from a blank workspace, I can add my disease data in. You can see it just loads it, but there's nothing going on here. It just has my basic samples. I can go to that file tab, use the apply template button, choose a template. Uh, this one will work. That's the template I just made. If I hit open, it's going to apply that template to my workspace. And so you can see it made all the new groups, all the gates, sorted my data into those new groups. So it did everything it does basically if I were to open the template and drag and drop the FCS files into it. It's basically doing that same process. It's just doing it to the samples that I've already loaded into the workspace. The only real difference is if I go to my layouts right now, you can see it still has the generic layout that, whatever this workspace had before, it still has. And so it has this empty layout, but it also has my new layouts from, or my layouts from the template as well. Um, Same with the tables, it will have the tables for my template as well. And so, but it'll also have the basic empty table. And so it's basically the same process either way if you use the apply template button or if you open a template and drag and drop the FCS files into the template. Either way, it kind of gets you to the same place. Okay. So we have 10 minutes left. I'm hoping to show the command line in the last 10 minutes. But I see one more question. Yeah, there's a question about can you make a table selecting each condition separately? And certainly. So we can do it here in this table. Basically, well, I guess you can do it by each group. You could do some fancy work with the keyword iteration to only choose certain conditions, but I think it's easier in most cases just to put all of one condition into a group like I've done here. And right now, if I create a table, it's just going to show my flu group, for instance, which is the one that only has three samples. So that's probably how I would sort it by group, is I just, or sort it by condition, is I just put the conditions into their own group and do it that way. You could use the keyword iteration just like we were doing for the layout to specify like a highly specific set of keyword combinations to create tables with. But it's a lot, it can be a lot more work when it's kind of easier just to put them in groups and do it that way. Okay, I'm gonna dive into the command line. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and close and quit FlowJo, the normal FlowJo. And the command line, I should mention again, is a pretty advanced tool. I don't expect most new users or people who aren't comfortable with a small amount of coding to get into it. But there's some unique cases where the command line is really useful. And so for those users, I was just going to show it. So we're going to quit FlowJo completely because we're going to run FlowJo in the command line here. I've already written a script, so let's just go ahead and I can look at both these things, I suppose. Um, so just to start with like a real basic outline, like a really basic outline, basically what we're doing is we're launching the FlowJo application, we're handing it the template, so this template that I've already made here earlier, we're handing it the data, um, like this folder full of FCS files here, for instance, and then we're going to generate some outputs. And so let me just go ahead and make sure that I actually set up this template right because I'm actually second guessing myself now. Um, I'm just going to double click on the template to go ahead and launch it. It's going to take a second to open. Okay. So the things I want to check before I run it. First of all, I just want to check that I have this batch setting set up. I actually know that, yeah, let's go ahead and see here. Yeah, so my batch to PDF is set up correctly. It's going to output it on the desktop. So I wanted to make sure that was correct. And then if I go to my table, I also just want to make sure that my table, okay, I did not do that right. So right now my table was set to display. I want it to be saved on my computer. So I'm going to set it to file, save it as an Excel file, and put it on my desktop, which Mac is asking me if I want to allow several times for some reason. So I will allow it on my Mac. I'm just going to save it to my desktop. So this should create the table on my desktop as well as a PDF of my layout on the desktop when I run it in command line here. So that should be good to go. Okay. And then I'll need to save this as again as a new template just because I made that change. And so I'm just going to overwrite my old template on the desktop here. Yep, that should work. And then close this. So we're good to go right now on my uh, command line function. Let me go open that script again because I think I closed it. Here it is. Okay. So I have my command line, my terminal, because I'm on a Mac. But you can do this in command line on the Windows as well. I have it open here, and in order to run this function, let's just walk through the function again. First, I'm gonna say the open command, and then just these first, the W, G, and A commands are useful for running it appropriately. So I would just always put these first three commands in. The path to the application is next. For Mac, most of the time it looks something like this. I added the FlowJo version to my FlowJo. For many people, it will just be like flowjo.app here on the Mac. On the Windows, it'll look a little bit more like this. except for it'll be in your program files. After the application, we'll do double dash and then arguments or args. Um, and so that's followed by all the arguments. In this case, it is the path to my template, which I probably want to double check is correct. But yeah, I named my template. You can see, oh, here's my template. It hopefully has the same path as this. I'll also have to give it the path to my data folder. And so you can see again, it's just the folder on my desktop here. That's my data folder. We'll also want to put in these two commands here, batch and batch table. This will save my PDF and my table to the uh, desktop in this case, or wherever I've specified in the template, which in this case is the desktop. And it will also save my workspace as a new workspace. I'm just going to call the new workspace command line.wsp. You can name it anything. Maybe I'll call it command line example.wsp. Whatever name you type in here is what's going to name it. And then once we're done with everything we need to do, we might as well quit it. And so that's what the quit is there for. So I can just copy this code and paste it into my command line here. And so when I hit enter, it's going to run that code in the command line. Um, we should see, yep, this will pop up, this will pop up. I will allow it on my Mac. I'll enter in my portal password so FlowJo actually can run. You could choose Remember Me to make it run, um, to remember you, I guess, simply put. And then you can see it has generated my things already. It's pretty fast. So, actually don't see my new workspace, desktop, command line. Weird. And it says save as. But it looks like I got everything else in time. So, um, you can see my template here, or my tables here. And so, we have the tables. It has all my statistics. That's perfect. Don't need to save any changes to that. It also made my PDF with all of my images here, and so that's great as well. It for some reason did not make my, unless I'm just not seeing it, it did not make my workspace, even though I said save as. Honestly, if I just run it again, it might just do it. It may have been because I was kind of delaying and not entering in my portal information fast enough, and so it may have been open still by the time it was at that step. Let's see if it does it now. Nope, I don't see any. Why is it not? Save as users. Did I type something in wrong? Desktop. Seems like the correct path to me. Weird. Yeah. Well, normally it would save a new workspace. Maybe it's because I took out the version ID. Um, there's another command that you can give it a unique ID. I forget if it's unique ID, but it might want me to do that when I'm saving as, maybe beforehand. I can't quite remember if that's a command. Probably should have double checked this beforehand. Huh, there it is. Weird. It wants the unique ID in there for some reason. I didn't put that in the slides. I didn't think it was necessary, but throwing in this unique ID, I guess, is the trick to getting it to save as a workspace. And so should have tested that ahead of time, but throwing that into your terminal, I guess, will make it save the workspace. For some reason, it needs that extra command. So that, though, was an overview of how to run FlowJo headlessly using those templates. Um, if there's any questions about anything, I know we're kind of at the top of the hour, but feel free to drop them in the chat and I'll stick around. Oh, that's a very good question that was just asked. Um, so yes, this webinar will be available. The question was, will the webinar be available? Yes, the webinar will be available on our website. Let me just open up a new Firefox browser. Firefox, there it is. If you go to our website and go to flowjo.com, the webinar will be available in a little bit under our webinars tab, which is under the Learn. So Learn, Webinars. We have our list of upcoming webinars here that you may have already used to get to me. But there's also our previously recorded webinars listed here. And so you'll find it in a few days, probably under our previously recorded webinars section down here. And so you can press view recording to see this recording or other recordings that we've done recently. Here's another one I did. So you could watch it there. You can also watch it on our YouTube. If you just go to YouTube and search for FlowJo, you probably can find us. I think they'll put it there as well. But our website has it, and there's no ads on our website, so that's a cool reason to use it here. We also include our data sometimes. Kind of depends on our marketing person if they're filling up for adding it. I don't think they did for the most recent ones, but yeah, the recording will be available on our website. Okay. I guess while I'm on the website, just to show, there is more information under the Learn tab here. If you go to FlowJo University, our documentation. So FlowJo University has all the videos, and so in this case, we're using version 10, and you can see all of our version 10 videos. And so you can learn like section by section each of the different options here, like the T button, which is I think is important. Um, you can also go to Learn and go to our help/documentation. And so our documentation, again, it breaks up by different softwares, but if you go to FlowJo 10, we have detailed documentation. And so if you wanted to dive more into templates, let's say, I think that is under, forget what section we put under, workspace samples. Da, 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 da. Do we see the word template here? No. Is there a different section? Maybe it's under samples and file types. Is that it? The FlowJo workspace, maybe. Okay, I'm just kind of guessing around at where it would be, but somewhere in here is our template documentation. It might take a little bit of clicking to get there. Oops. Feels like it should be under workspace probably. Groups, graph, da, 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 da. Technical, I don't think it's under technical FAQ, maybe under advanced features. Do we consider templates advanced? No. Oh, yes, we do. Okay, there's templates. And so you can get, there's actually a video here as well, it looks like, and more detailed documentation about anything you'd want with templates. There's actually a second video here just on setting those iteration settings because that can be tricky. So if you want to do a deep dive in anything we talked about today, it should be available here on our website. Okay. Okay. So I'll stick around for any further questions. Um, As we do that, I'll take a look at seeing if I can figure out why it didn't repopulate my group earlier. If I go back to my original demo thing, okay. So here's my original workspace again. Let's see here. Here's the panel. Looks wrong here. So yeah, that's why it was wrong later. Why is this wrong? Well, let's see. If we turn it off, what does it look like? That looks right. Uh, let's switch this to my all samples group. And then panel, and then 4. That looks right. Right? 4 goes correctly through here. Nope, does it? What? No, what's it doing? It's going from B6 for some reason. Oh, probably because I have it. You can select different values up here. It might be doing something funny because I have it set to the PDF, which I normally wouldn't do, but it seems to be good here. And then if I save this as a template again, which we're making lots of templates today, um, call this template demo 2. Save it on the desktop. Now, if I look at it, it might just work. Yeah, so that's what it's supposed to look like. It loads each of the individual samples in the correct order. And you can see if I switch groups, it should switch samples. It's like here's healthy, for instance, which should correspond to healthy. And we see that, hopefully. C12, C2, B12, C10. Yep. And again, if I go to that one group that only has 3 samples, which was my flu group, it only loads the 3 samples. So that is how it's supposed to look like. I think it wasn't doing that before just because, actually, I don't know why. I think it's because I had messed with the workspace before the webinar, and whatever I was doing there, I think I just broke it at some point. And so just by setting it back to all samples group, I think, and reloading things correctly, it loads correctly here now too. Okay, see some stuff in the chat. Mostly thank yous. Um, right. There's a question I see about creating a hierarchy. Are you talking about just like the gating hierarchy in the workspace? Like the gates I've made here? Okay. I can just walk through quickly some of the basic gates I made here. I don't think I'm not I was kind of doing it fast because I didn't really care what the gates looked like because I knew I wasn't gonna be uh, necessarily using this data for any reason. I was just using it for the demo. So I drew some kind of sloppy gates. This is a wide gate on my forward scatter and side scatter that I was using for the size inclusion. I included both these lymphocytes, like my T cells, B cells are probably located down here. And then these larger cell types, which if I had to guess were probably my monocytes, maybe. Um, and so that's just based on size. Like I can draw a gate like this. You know, some people might be tighter with their size gate and just include maybe these lymphocytes down here, but I kind of tend to be more generous because I might want to look at these bigger cells. Excluding the debris. And then I have my single cells gate. Again, a typical gate, forward scatter area versus forward scatter height is how most people will do their single cells gating. Because the cells uh, area should increase proportionate to its height if the width, right? If the width is increasing or the area is increasing disproportionate to height, it might indicate that 2 cells are stuck together. So the cells are wider than they are tall because they're taking up more of that pulse because they're stuck together. And so that indicates that these are maybe doublets and the ones that are kind of on the diagonal here are probably our singlets. So that's a typical single cells gate. Um, Yeah, I could start from a workspace. I think it might take a lot of time just to go through all the gates. Just right, just because it takes a moment to do gating. Um, I'll just jump through really fast. So my live gate is here for the live dead. Just to show you what I did. CD3, C19, I'm just using the CD3 and C19 parameters. And then we have our CD4, CD8, and then I think I did something with like the different naive memory markers for my effector memory cells and central memory, etc. And so that's just some basic gates I drew. This gate really doesn't look good at all, to be honest. Again, I was kind of just drawing these for the sake of having populations. I wasn't making them too pretty. So if I was to kind of come back in here, I might do something like this to try and focus on just my effector memory RA here, and then these are maybe like naive cells down here. Um, but yeah, those are my basic gates. Let me jump to, there's a question about how to rename the layout. That's pretty easy. So if you jump to the layout, I have some basic names here. If you just double click, like click twice aggressively with your mouse on either of these names, you can get the option to rename it. Um, and then if I want to rename it, I could just call this like renamed, and then it will change name. Um, right. So, right. Just making sure there's no questions in the Q&A. There's another question in the chat. So the populate, if you're referring to population in the layout right now, okay, I see a question about templates. I want to jump back to the template question just because that's what the webinar was focused on. Good question about including plugins in a template. I almost showed that today, but I decided not to. The original person who was going to host this webinar, I think, had an idea about how he wanted to use plugins in a template. You can use plugins in a template, kind of, but they're a pain in the butt. Well, I shouldn't maybe say that, but they can be more challenging to use in a template just because, like I said before, if you've run plugin analysis, like machine learning analysis, and you've generated results in a workspace, and then you save that workspace as a template, those machine learning results won't come with the workspace. Um, so you'll have to, because the machine learning almost in every case is run on like a per sample basis or a concatenated file, or you've run it on some group of data, and you can't just apply those same results to a new set of data without like rerunning the machine learning in some way. Um, and so there's not a lot of cases where it would make sense to have a plugin and then apply it automatically in a template. In most cases, it's easier just to like not include the plugin at all in the template and then just like rerun. For instance, if I wanted to do tsne, I would just rerun my tsne here. Or if I wanted to do flowsum or embed sum, I would just rerun those like after the fact. So like I would save my workspace as a template, load in my samples, then choose the population I want to run flowsum on and run flowsum. Um, Specifically with something like flowsum, you can do this apply on map function. And so what you could do is you could copy like the flowsum results into the new template's new plugin folder. So you'd have to like run a plugin to make a plugin folder first. But then you could copy the flowsum results from the old workspace into the new plugin folder and then use apply on map to apply those previous flowsum results onto the new workspace. Um, the flowsum video, I think, goes into more detail on doing apply on map. UMap can apply on map too. So yeah, talking about some other plugins. So I see you're mentioning FlowAI, Singlet Secret, Easy Daffy. Um, so yeah, FlowAI and Peacock and FlowCut are probably the most useful plugins to include in a template. Because those are cleanup plugins, they can just kind of be rerun. Again, you'll have to rerun the algorithm in order to generate new results. And so what you could do though is you could like going back to my original workspace here. Cool. We can go here. I just want to make sure this is a live group. Perfect. You'll want to make sure, just like I was doing, that this is a live group. And then you can grab a sample, maybe the smallest sample just for time's sake. I have Peacock. I don't have FlowAI, but I have Peacock Handy, and Peacock and FlowAI are similar in how they work. Um, Run the algorithm on the data. For anyone who's not familiar with plugins, that's a whole separate webinar you'd probably have to watch. But there are third-party algorithms that are available in FlowJo. These are tools developed by third-party researchers. Peacock was the SACE lab. Um, and so that's just, yeah, so we're running Peacock. Once we get the results, we can apply the results to the group here. I'll just do it to my flu because again, this will take some time. we can ignore those messages. And so once this gets done running again, we can save this as a template. It will save the peacock node because the peacock node is now on the group. So it'll save that peacock node and the peacock gates. And then when I reload the data into the template, you'll see it has that peacock node. And so it will start running automatically the algorithm on the data, and it will generate new peacock gates. And then I can apply my gating hierarchy to those gates. Um, so yeah, you could do that with the peacock or flow AI, for instance. Singlet seeker, I haven't tried. Again, it'd probably be easier just to like, well, because what singlet seeker does is it makes a gate, right? And so, well, if it does make a derived parameter, I haven't tried, I guess, using singlet seeker with a template. You might be able to use singlet seeker with a template. Um, you would do the same thing I'm doing right now with Peacock, where you would run singlet seeker on a sample, apply it to a group of samples, save that as a template, open the template, load the new data in, which we haven't gotten to that yet with the Peacock, but and then uh, let it run the algorithm again on the new data, and then you could get the results that way. I think I haven't actually tried it with Singlet Seeker. Flow AI will work, and then Easy Daffy. Um, yeah, again, Easy Daffy. I don't know if it would trigger it to run when you open the template. Again, I just haven't tried it. You could try it. It'd be easier, I think, just to like use the template normally, save it without the Easy Daffy node saved in the gating hierarchy, open the template, and then just run Easy Daffy on whatever sample, whatever population you want to run it on, or set of populations you want to run it on. So then Easy Daffy will run, it'll generate results, it'll get you new gates, and then you can apply that Easy Daffy node to like a group and then run it on all the samples in a group if that's what you wanted it to do. So I I'd probably just in the case of Easy Daffy, I'd probably just um apply it to like hold off on doing it until after the template and then run it in the new workspace and then apply it to the group that way. Um, because I don't know if Easy Daffy makes all those new gates, and I don't know if those new gates you would have to, it wouldn't really make sense. You'd have to like apply the new gates to the group in the before saving it as a template, which would which would give you the same gates for the whole group rather than Easy Daffy normally would not give you the same gates for each sample in the group. So um, Full AI though, definitely. Like, so we'll look at Peacock here. So I've run Peacock on my flu data set. I can now save this as a template again. We'll call it template demo 3. Okay, let's not save that. And then we can open up this. Uh, I can add my data. Whoops. It'll automatically start running it on it'll automatically start running Peacock on my samples in the flu group. Only the flu group though, just because I didn't run Peacock on any of the other groups, and so my other groups won't have that node. And so it is running Peacock now. It should generate those good events, bad events. If I had applied the gates to it and it was a live group, it should automatically apply the gates onto the good events. In this case, I actually didn't. I just let it run, and so we'd have to like manually copy and paste the gates onto the good events. But yeah, once it finishes, it should generate again the populations, and then we could apply our gating and all that. Okay, yeah, if there's any more questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Okay, I might get wrapping up soon. If you do have more questions too, you can always email us. I'll put my email in chat just because maybe folks will get it more easily that way. But you can email us at flowjo@bd.com. That'll come to me or one of my two colleagues. You can also give us a phone call. I put my number in the slide. It is this phone number. And so feel free to shoot us an email or give us a call 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Pacific time, and we'd be happy to answer any questions about any topic. You can ask about templates. You can ask about your specific workflow. You could ask about any anything you wonder about FlowJo, we are happy to answer. Okay, well, with that, I might go ahead and wrap up this webinar. Thank you everyone for joining me today. Um, Hope you all have a good one.